Good morning. Hi, Mike.
Hello, I'm in my kitchen today. It's just too hot in my office. It's over 30 and I know.
So. Yeah. Not good for your productivity, is it? I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to join as usual. I did come up with an agenda for us for today.
Hey, Mark.
Hello. Amen.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Hey, Mike, Ariel, black boxes.
Hi, folks. Yeah, I'm just setting up in the kitchen. It's over 30 in my office and it's just too warm. So.
No air conditioning there?
I live in the UK. What do we need air conditioning for?
I don't know. I hear energy is cheap.
Yeah, but yeah, the EU is behind in air conditioning for sure.
The UK particularly, it's so rarely hot. I mean, I have literally just today ordered a mini air conditioning portable unit just so we can move around the house. I mean, in the house, it's fine. I mean, it's the house is 500 years old, so it's doing okay. But the outside, I have an office in one of what used to be a garden, not a shed, but an outbuilding, and it gets too much sun, it gets too hot. So yeah. Anyway, I'm just making my tea. I'll be back with a sec.
All right, so 2 more minutes. We'll get started. I have start sharing my screen here in a second.
And it was my birthday over the weekend. It turns out that you can be 29 every year as long as it's an odd number and you choose the correct base.
Oh, okay. Well, happy birthday. You're fishing for wishes there.
$29.95 plus shipping and handling.
There you go.
Okay, so let's get going a little bit. Hi, Zvonko. So gonna share my screen for a second just to show things. Okay. So there's one thing I wanted to sort of, I don't know, say something I heard. I think it was Manu, you said it, not really sure, but at IETF, somebody made a comment to me, which is absolutely correct, basically saying that, I'm steering this working group in the direction that is, of interest to my employer, which, well, not only, I mean, my entire background is, I guess, enterprise software. Also at Microsoft was working, Windows Server, things like that. Sure, I guess it's absolutely true. I have two sort of side notes to that. One is this may indicate blind spots. Please look for those, because if there are blind spots that I have and things are not getting, the attention that they deserve, then we absolutely must, pay attention to those. But the second thing is, if you don't pay attention to enterprise software, you get this. I was looking through this today. This is the entity attestation token. And I understand why this thing exists. And the reason I started looking at it is because the message wrapper IETF draft just went out. And it talks about wrapping an entity attestation token. So it's like, and then it started talking about things like, relying parties. And then I'm looking through claims that are in the entity attestation token. Look at these things. Is debugging enabled, OEM boot, hardware model version, boot counts, and digital letters of approval, and all sorts of things. Now, this is where I'm talking about blind spots. Maybe there are relying parties out there who are prepared to deal with this. But in the world I live in, it's simply not. Right? It's are you my payroll application or not? And I understand that, maybe between, IoT devices and some, really propeller head environments, you do get this. And I mean, I'm a propeller head myself. I love this stuff. But the fragility that would introduce into any relying party is absolutely stunning. So anyway, I just wanted to ensure that we, both understand the needs of I guess, the key moneymaker, in my opinion anyway, of confidential computing, and also not lose track of blind spots. So that's sort of my intro for today.
Yeah, and Mark, I may have said something like this, but first I want to clarify that it's with the utmost respect for what you do, because of the leadership that you put in this group is in fact extremely helpful. I cannot take that role. I'm too busy with other stuff trying to get, off the ground. And the second thing is that I do think you're correctly stating that you are one of the few end users, or you represent an organization that is one of the few end users of this technology, which I think makes your voice particularly important. But I think, and of course, I also represent my employer, much, much smaller employer. But I think it was in the context of a discussion around the types of workloads that we should think about. So you mentioned the payroll one, which happens to be a payroll that only handles information that pertains, or that belongs to JP Morgan, for instance. What I may have said that in the context of what we're trying to do, which is enabling workloads, or consider workloads that manage information and credentials of other entities,
Right.
specifically to enable authority delegation when a workload needs to give keys that belong to an entity, not to JP Morgan, to another workload. And now you actually see, when you look at that use case, you see that confidential computing, at least from what we have researched and architected and built and discovered, we believe that confidential computing is absolutely necessary to enable that chaining of a workload acting on behalf of an entity or another workload, and then delegating authority to others, which is essentially issuing credentials, right? Which basically brings us back to the workload identity work, where I keep thinking that we should really think about the verifiers and the identity provider and all of these other actors as themselves workloads that should themselves work, be in the scope of trustworthy workload identity. So anyway, so that's the context.
I generally agree with you. So let me put the high order bit on this. I think everyone in this working group should do their best to advocate for their area of expertise and their understanding of where this is headed. And I also agree that workload identity, especially as used by the enterprise, will also deal a great deal with delegation, acting on behalf of, and all of these issues, which, as you all know, tend to be very thorny. So is if a customer comes into a I don't know, trading application, and then some on the back end, a trade happens. Well, this trade does not happen on behalf of the the algorithm that's doing the trading. Ultimately, it's happening on behalf of the customer who is trying to their business case is optimize my returns, right? So not whatever the intermediate node may imagine its role to be. So all of that is very important. So what I would encourage to that effect is either as part of reference architecture or as a standalone document, author your content. Explain your needs and your intended solutions, and then we will look for ways of integrating it. And again, we have the Whimsy working group, we have the RATS working group, perhaps additional, organizations, entities, whatever collaborations that we will seek to push this into. So and I also cannot be the only person here authoring content. I will not scale to that.
Right. No, I fully appreciate that. And yeah, it's just a question of bandwidth on our side. But we do have a document that's coming into a state that I think we will be able to share more broadly. And then to react to what you have on the screen right now, which is, I think, something that I've also, as an electrical engineer that dealt very much with chips a long time ago, and then coming into the internet and now trying to bridge the two between confidential computing and internet scale infrastructure. I think what we are witnessing here is indeed different, parts of the industry, of the value chain, right? Talking with their own or bringing their own, mindset or mental model. And so basically the EAT guys in particular and RATS is very, very low level. And when people like you are thinking about, system-wide things, and that's what we need to bridge somehow. And I think the CCC is particularly well positioned to do that. And that should be one of our goals, is to move stuff up from the chips and then be able to articulate to the industry why this is not just about chips.
Yes. And I am going to reach out. I'm kind of a little disappointed that I haven't seen Hank or Thomas on this call in the last couple of weeks. And
I am
Hank is here.
Sorry. Yes, I'm late. I'm always delayed in time and space. No problem. But
Hank.
Also, this is my message for today. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if it's visible. Everything is fine.
Everything's fine. Yes.
Where's the fire dumpster?
Nice rendition of the Cybertruck there. Okay, so I sent out sort of a despondent message last night saying I don't really have an agenda for today because I imagine or for some reason 8 days after coming back from Greece I still feel jet lagged and I still get up at like 3 in the morning, and then when time comes to do productive work, my brain is a bit of a fog. But I did come up with a couple of things for us to do today. So one of them is I went and looked at what issues are there in GitHub, in both the SWI work group under governance and in our own GitHub. And I wanted to go through them, see, have they been addressed? Do they need to be changed? We need a sense of the task list and priority. So I wanted to go through that, and also I don't think it's too early to start thinking about how we're going to contribute, if at all, to IETF 124. That's now less than 4 months out. And as we discovered last time, these can be time-consuming endeavors trying to talk through this. So again, Hank, you are now involved, I guess, in composite workloads with Thomas. And I do not know if they're going to involve this working group because ultimately attestation needs to produce an identity, and we're sort of at the receiving end of whatever you guys come up with. But there is also this background check model with workload identity and how that works. I have voiced during IETF my grave concern with scalability of the background check model, because effectively it forces the verifier to be hit on every attestation, and can introduce either fragility of the relying party, or it can introduce really, really difficult, like 6-9, difficult to operate, difficult to architect correctly verifiers. But my concerns may be overblown. But at any rate, background check model is a key part of RATs. As a result, we should probably think about how workload identity plays into that. So again, Hank, you let us know if you are still interested in doing the contribution. If not, we'll have to find someone else.
I'm here. So there are ways to mitigate this a little bit. But these are all passport model things. The passport model things really are the performance and the flexible items. Background check model is when you do not want to expose policy for verifier outside your domain typically. So so it might be more of I want to say the secondary use case for us. I don't want to prioritize more than first and second, but it might also be like only 3% of the use cases. I don't know. I really don't know. But it seems very straightforward to me to do the passport model, because we can do a sub-zero trust there, and then prepare a evidence, and then for freshest reasons just recreate like the peak of the iceberg evidence, and if it matches the attestation results, then you can just ship it off and prove it's fresh in that instant. So there are some minor tricks that are not very complicated you can do to show freshness, which is very important for us here in this highly volatile workload environment, potentially highly volatile. But for the background check, you're very right. Even when the relying party is looking for the right verifier, it might be too late. So that's a problem, yes.
Okay, so I wanted to also solicit.
Mark,
yeah, please go ahead.
Add a thing. So I don't know how many of you made it, but I think it was last hack. Chris Butler from Red Hat dialed in from Australia and gave a really interesting talk about some real-world use cases and some patterns, and specifically enterprise use cases. And he did highlight issues around availability of verifiers, which may just be interesting just to pick up. I think it was a very interesting talk anyway, because he did talk about real world use cases, which I think is always good to hear about. But I would heartily recommend anyone to listen to it, maybe 1.25 or 1.5 times speed if you're interested.
Can you maybe put the link in the chat?
Yeah, let me find it.
Yes, please.
Okay. So
sorry, let me quickly interject. I raised my hand.
Yeah.
So there is this complex remote attestation scenarios, and one of them, and I think it's the very first in queue, and Yogesh will be able to confirm that, we have a multi-verifier document incubating at the IETF that addresses exactly that problem. What do you do if there is a bottleneck? What do you do if you have to? If it's hard to decide which verifier to use because your policy sometimes is confidential? Right? For example, composition policy is confidential, but component policy is trivial because it's from the vendor that creates the component. But the composition is kind of secret and yours. Or maybe there are other reasons why you might choose different verifiers for different tasks. And availability, for example, is one thing. And then we have the fringe case where the verifier is a function that's called, and whenever it's not called, it's dormant. So it doesn't. It needs helper agents, and that's the co-serve work from ARM to do the that's discussed in the attestation SIG here in CCC that would enable such a dormant verifier to as fast as possible get the required inputs to do the appraisal, for example. So yeah, that's a hot topic. The availability of verifiers, and I think Yogesh is I think the main orchestrator of that.
If I were to add something to availability of verifiers, I also put something on load on verifiers. So if you remember in the reference architecture draft that we have so far for with TWI, we have this section on short-lived workloads, so like lambdas and whatnot, and the interesting suggestion that I made there is that you use local key generation like ceiling to workload functions to be able to obtain the credentials once or procure credential once and then keep and every time you stand up another instance of the workload, if one is cached, you use the local one. So we have facilities. I don't know how ubiquitous they are. I know they're widespread. All right. So the other thing I want RATS working group to tackle head on, and again, Hank, this is for you, is RATS really, the closest it came to mentioning relying parties, as far as I've seen so far, is this entity attestation token that I just, breathlessly critiqued for being so, low level and so close to the wire. But, I really do believe that it's best served not by this working group, but by RATS to explain how we can create relying parties. The key requirement is that the authorization policy on the relying party is extra stable, and I'm talking years, right? Even as the workloads get upgraded, the hardware gets upgraded, all sorts of things about the workloads change, but the claims that the workload maps to, as in my case of payroll application, so all of the low-level bits and bytes get translated into that. So again, wanted to hear your thoughts. I believe it's important. Maybe there are, maybe I'm seeing it wrong.
There's a fundamental strategy here at work, and going from left to right, so to speak. You start with the evidence, you crunch the evidence and appraisal, and then you get the attestation result, and that goes to the relying party. So evidence is chaos. It's the Wild West. You have so many evidence formats. It's depending on your root of trust. It's depending on your system design. It can be AS1, it can be whatever, TPM structures that are just TLV binaries, right? There's so many evidence formats. And on the other end, we try to keep the attestation result space relatively homogeneous so that the relying party doesn't have to do, 12 stacks, right? It's awful. And that is why EAT is the primary candidate to convey attestation results in order to keep the zoo, the heterogeneity of evidence contained on the left side of the verifier, so to speak.
So are you telling me that the entity
party,
attestation token is not attestation result, but actually evidence?
It's both. It can be both.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
I'm not arguing. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. So this is recorded, right?
Yes.
So I will not go into in-depth opinion here about how this came to be. Not everybody likes EAT. Let's keep it at that. And I think EAT is an excellent attestation result format. And we can even nest assertions in EAT with the help of the conceptual message wrapper designed by Thomas and I, mainly, and that helps a lot. So you can have even a nested hierarchy of results somehow if you want. And
wait, why? Hold on a second. This is what we need to somehow connect. I don't see it being compatible with the Whimsy workload identity token. And really what I would love to see is the workload identity token become attestation results.
The workload identity token is a JWT. A JWT is easily translated into CWT, and an EAT is a CWT. So I don't feel that there's a problem, but maybe you know more than I do.
No, I assume you do. I guess what I'm interested in is having something in RATS that clearly explains how it connects to Whimsy or something like Whimsy.
No, we have to write that. We have to write that down.
So maybe that can be our contribution to IETF 124.
Specific attestation results that would inform roles in Whimsy and workload, I want to say, infrastructure in general. Yes, that would be something interesting. It's just a puzzle piece. It's basically the end of the story. What do I get and how do I react to it? That doesn't explain how we create the identities, the identity documents on the fly, the stickiness of workload. That's all before that story. But we could start with the result also, because that's very clear. What does the relying party need? What is required so it can act upon? And we can do this basically the other way around and go from there and saying, in order to create this attestation result claim, you need the following appraisal inputs. Therefore, you need the following associations of workload platforms. Therefore, the operating system is not in scope for certain scenarios, and so on and so on. And so that would also be a way to do it. And I think EAT is a relatively good target, again, for attestation results. For evidence, you don't have a choice typically.
No, for evidence, look, evidence is between the attester and the verifier. So this is where
Yes.
from the standpoint of this working group, it's let others cook. But you're saying EAT is a great vehicle. But look at it. Like, what is it about this that a relying party will like?
It's a structural. It's basically it's a stack and the semantic well-defined claims. So whatever we add to the claims, semantics, there's IANA registry for CWT claims. That is what EAT is using, or JWT claims. There's symmetry between JWT and CWT, and so I think whatever we need the relying party to know, and that's not in these IANA registries, we write into an internet draft and say, yes, a verifier has to produce this result because use case A, and just argue from use case, user scenarios requirements, and so on. And that's a relatively straightforward thing. Maybe even delve into a little bit of threat model and security considerations, why we need this to mitigate some other things. And then we have a good understanding what the relying party needs and what the verifier has to produce. And when we understand that the verifier can't produce that because it's lacking evidence about the coherence of workload to a platform, then we can argue better, okay, then we need that also, but we can paralyze that work, I think, in practice.
Right. So look, I am very reluctant to jump into the space without your guidance, because I think with like the bull in the China shop effect, and it would probably be counterproductive. But I believe the following two things, high-level goals must be attained. One is creating impedance match between RATs and WIMSI.
Okay. That's actually legwork, the most difficult thing, that both working group agrees on the same, I want to say, gap analysis.
Yeah, but this is a high-level goal that I believe is very, very important. Because look, WIMSI right now is not confidential computing centric. It's confidential computing tolerant, like with a big asterisk around agent, but it's tolerant. The second high order bit that I believe needs to be achieved is some understanding, like well-documented understanding, between the verifier and the IDP. Because today, verifier is this low-level laboratory that converts evidence into attestation results. And an IDP is something that converts, also evidence, maybe in a different meaning of the word, but some authenticators, I suppose, into claims corresponding to an identity, which attestation results don't really have a notion, built-in notion of an identity.
But attestation results are about a peer on the internet. So knowing what peer you are talking about with an attestation result requires some form of identification.
I think the key word here that Mark said is authentication versus identification. I think evidence that comes out of the chip is an authentication material, and then the identity provider, which really is the authentication server also, which to me should be bundled with the verifier, but that's a separate conversation, basically converts that into a long-lived identifier for that workload.
A long-lived is very, very key here.
Yes.
And I also want to, so look, you can always advocate for cases where a payroll application that runs on an AMD server in this corner and on an Intel server over in that corner is a different identity, but it really isn't in an enterprise application case where at some point in time you have to stop being stop caring about what hardware lives on. All of that gets hidden, and on the other end, what comes out is something that is not about the boot counts and the uptimes and the software versions, but it's really about I am this piece of software. Okay, Hank, Mike, you all have your hands up. So I guess in the order top to bottom, Hank.
Yeah, so there's a problem with what Manu said. So Manu, in principle, you're correct. Evidence can be used for authentication. And there's a strong Internet Architecture Board statement that says, don't. Very much so. And we had this interaction with the CCC already. So yeah, while factually correct, it's immoral and harmful to the Internet. It will never be done in the IETF. You must authenticate before you may exchange remote attestation evidence. And you cannot use the evidence for authentication because that is sidelining the open internet and will enable logins, logouts, and splintering of the internet potentially.
I was talking about authentication of the workload itself. I'm not talking about authentication of a human or whatever. I'm talking about I was trying to make the point that what Mark is talking about is a long-lived identifier that is in fact an identifier of, let's say, the payroll workload. The payload workload has many components that have a life cycle that changes over time. And so what Mark is looking for is a long-lived identifier for that thing. And then the components, which, of which, some produce evidence at the chip level, some produce, this attestations that come from the operator of the data center and other sources of attestation results. Those things have their own life cycle and changes underneath the identifier of the payroll workload. And so I was talking about authentication of the workload or of whatever stuff runs and produces that evidence, right? To try to punt on the words. So I'm not talking about authentication of the humans. Of course, authentication of the humans needs to be separated from that. I do believe that in the end, whatever the IETF is religiously bound to, the protecting the open internet is glorious, but from a consumer perspective, there's a whole bunch of other conversations to be had there. So let's getting back to the workload stuff. What's important is the fact that the identity provider is there to recognize a workload and say, aha, this is the payroll workload as intended by, let's say, Mark at JP Morgan, and then can convey that to a relying party so that the relying party can say, I want to connect to that workload because it is the payroll as deployed by Mark at JP Morgan. And that chaining is what the long-lived identity needs to be able to represent.
Yeah. I don't seek to preclude relying party having intimate knowledge of whoever is connecting to it from the ETH-like perspective. I will, however, say that relying parties in the real world very much like to be insulated from all that. And it just means that volatility needs to be encapsulated elsewhere. And I've been harping on this point for a really long time. The fact that the RATS verifier basically says, I'm spitting out these attestation results and never says anything about the experience of the relying party dealing with these attestation results is going to be effectively a serious deployment blocker for all of our efforts.
Yeah, there is, just as a thought, there was a initiative by Intel, I'm not sure how strong that is still be, that the relying party creates requirements to the evidence, to the attester, what it wants to know. So that's a certain view, a subset of evidence, I want to say, or even a capability negotiation. Can the a tester actually tell me these things. And now you're saying that you're doing the other way around. Like, is there any feedback on how that worked out? Does it fail continuously, thereby making the verifier a useless blocker?
Yeah. And I
so,
really think even this is the wrong way of thinking about the problem, because normally a relying party is an entity that is far removed organizationally, politically, technically, logically from the, even being able to say, what is it that I want. If you look at it sort of from the end-to-end perspective, at some point in time, somebody downloads some open source software, writes some additional software on top of it, puts it through a CI/CD pipeline, and then that gets deployed. And the people who own the sort of all of those systems, they have their own policies. And at some point in time, they will say, if you are running the code that matches, this artifact that we just compiled on the hardware that is managed or that satisfies the policies that our data center management folks have defined, that constitutes your payroll application, right? And inevitably, that comes down to the verifier being able to specify in the verifier architecture how we're going to do this. And we're free to ignore this to the basically detriment of the ability to get this solution deployed in the real world.
Hey, Mark. Mike's hand is up.
Yeah,
Mike.
Please.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I wanted to let that conversation run its course. So Manny said an important word, and I want to qualify it. And that word was long-lived. And the qualifier I'd like, I think, to add is optionally. Sometimes we do really need to have ephemeral identities, and it's really important that we don't design ourselves into a long-lived approach, which is, we've had decades of this with certificates. So we just need to make sure that we think about short and long-lived identities, because there are times when you're going to be bringing up a microservice and you don't need that to be long-lived, whereas the larger system obviously is likely to have a long-lived components, and we need to think of it like that. So just to make sure that we don't think only about that.
Right, sure, Robert, I want to speak to that. So just something, you want to ensure that something that is discovered, for instance, to be vulnerable, does not continue acting like if it's healthy. And the way you do that is you issue shorter term credentials and you force more frequent reattestations. We also need to deal with that. But I'm speaking, when I say long-lived, I'm not actually talking about the credential. I'm talking about the policy on the relying party.
Yeah, no, exactly. No,
and when I say long-lived, I mean years.
Yes, I 100% agree. And not just days. We want years.
Architectures need to live for decades. Identities need to live for years, like as a ballpark.
Fine. Okay.
Okay.
Someone else had their hand up as well, but it's gone down again, I think.
Yeah, Mark covered it. He made the statement. So in terms of long-lived versus short period.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So now I guess I want to go ahead.
I was just going to totally agree, but I think this tension between long-lived and short-lived is essentially another symptom or manifestation of the fact that digital entities are, by many of them, most useful ones are composites of other digital entities, and each one of them have different life cycles. And so what Mark is talking about is these long-lived identities for composite and digital entities. And then what you're talking about, Mike, is, in some cases, we have some components that need to be very, very short-lived. And so those things, all of them need to be identified and then need to be composable.
And
what I mean by long-lived, actually misspoke, not identities, but authorization policies.
Yes, but your authorization policy needs to be about something, right? So there is an identifier of some sort that needs to remain static, remain constant for the duration of your policy.
I think we all agree it's worth stating it, and we've done that, so that's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Thank you.
But to me, what's particularly interesting in that concept is that it requires us to recognize the full life cycle of those digital entities. In particular, when we talk about humans or when we talk about things, right, physical things, those things have indeed years of existence. And so it's not just about a workload, which is of course the subject of this work group, but a workloads will represent, as agents, will be twins of entities that exist outside in the real world. And so those twins will need to have identities and identification and capabilities that match the life cycle of the entities that they represent in the digital realm. So anyway, leaving that there. Thank you.
Okay. So
raising my hand just real quick, like manually, we really have to structure all these. There's so much here that I am having a hard time to understand the sequence of work and the actual unambiguous work items. But I think that's the thing that I need most. This map of what there was a lot here, and I wouldn't be able to draw a map based on the input today.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe let me try and put a little bit of sense of structure in this. So we may go with one of two ways. I think I know which way we should be going. One is that we will say, okay, verifier produces attestation results, but verifier is sort of removed from the needs of the relying party. So, the attester, after receiving attestation results, need to talk to the ADP, get something extra stable that, the relying party will like. That's one way of going about it. Now, that would be the change to the RATS reference architecture, where attestation results are presented directly to the relying party. But we could get away from that or get around that if we simply say, in RATS, the relying party is the identity provider. We could do that. Another way of doing this is we could basically say, look, starting from the endpoint where the relying party authorization policy is extra stable, we will seek to create perhaps a profile of RATS that produces credentials in a way, real-world relying parties like, such as workload identity tokens, right? Now, Hank, you would know better, which way to do this, but I'm starting from the high-level end goal. We need extra stable authorization policies on relying parties. This is not optional if we seek to be commercially successful. And that means we need some sort of impedance match between RATS and identity providers, and we need some sort of impedance match between RATS and WIMSI.
So
we can talk about.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, I'm done.
Yeah. So I don't know. So when you say, okay, first of all, policies currently still are out of scope of the RATS Charter, because the RATS Charter was created to grow. At first, it was just evidence attestation results. Then it became endorsements and reference values. And the last thing that's still out of scope for the next growth burst, basically, is a policy. So now coming back to your statement, strong policy, stable for a long time on a relying party. Is it enough to be able to have an identifier for policy? That's just the claim. And you could offload the policy content part to identifying that and dealing with how it's expressed, represented, and managed later. So that's one thing I'm wondering. If you're talking about these hard requirements about policy for relying parties, can we mitigate that discussion or push it to the future, to kick the can down a little bit by saying we identify the policy, and that identifier will help us to do all the things we want to do when Reds read charters, because again, policy specification is not in scope. And I guess everybody's pretty happy with signed Rego statements, as far as I know. So I don't know how that really fits together.
So your relying party, so let's just look at, there could be many different ways of communicating with the relying party. Let's just stick to one to Whimsy. So in the workload identification token, there is a URI that is the identity of the workload. And in that URI, there are different parts. And in those parts, you can speak about different things. You can say, well, this is a, server in Germany, and this is my payroll app, and this is my domain of trust, all of this good stuff. There is nothing in the workload identity token, I think it's very much by design makes sense, that identifies any source of policy. There is an identifier. It's multi-part. It's the URI structures it in some way, and the relying party either likes it or it doesn't like it. And the policy on the relying party, the identity of that policy doesn't figure into anything at that level. Now, at some point in time, a mapping needs to happen between the evidence the tester provided and that workload identity token that got generated. And there is policy involved in that. And that policy may be around both the attributes of the device for purposes of, say, compositor, like device and hosting environment, and the properties of the workload itself. This is my payroll application. So, right, and there are policies involved in that, probably multiple policies. My hardware matches my specifications. My software matches what my CI/CD pipeline has produced, right? And again, there has to be a way of saying, how does my verifier do this? And if my verifier is supposed to produce my credential and it's a certificate, well, then my verifier is acting as a CA. And if my verifier is producing a workload identity token like a JOT, then it is done in this other way. And all I'm saying is we just need to explain through some, hopefully, RFC documents, what are these mechanisms? Not to say they're exclusive, not to say there's any other way of doing it, but by explaining it, you are addressing your the need of the marketplace to consume your solutions. Eric.
Yeah, I think I follow what you mean now, and it's going to be very challenging to separate policy from that.
So, policy is very much there. Right? We just need to explain where these policies exist. I guess I'm only challenging that the policy itself, policy identifier, is somehow part of the token that travels between entities.
But we're not going to specify at this time what that's going to look like. Is that also what you're saying?
Well, I think we should give some examples. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So in the URI that identifies the workload, I may communicate, because again, it's multi-part, right? So definitely I'll say payroll application. It may say the server on which this payroll application executing is in Germany. That's another part of the URI. It may have a third part of the URI saying that and again, this is for sake of argument only, that the supply chain that produced this workload, satisfies Department of Defense level 2 security policy. So there is a policy identifier for you. But that's all hidden in the URI, and it is something that the authorization policy on the relying party will examine and make a decision on. Are you good or are you not? Maybe we need Department of Defense level 3, or maybe we need something that's in France. All of that is going to be decided there. The URI can capture some bits and pieces. But then the question becomes, how do the attestation results, how does the evidence supplied by the attester map into that? And I guess what I'm trying to say here is we need to explain where in that chain of events that starts with the attester contacting the verifier and ending with the attester possessing the credential, where are these transitions taking place? And we can explain it in here is one way of doing it. Feel free to do it any other way, but if you do it this way, you produce the desired result. Sal.
So JWTs and CWTs are not terribly far apart. They do provide different contextual information, though. I think very easily you could support both JWTs and CWTs, focusing on CWTs as being the primary implementation and then sort of taking out the additional security context as needed for JWTs.
Yeah.
I think this is an easy lift. It's feels very close to an API endpoint for me. And I think in communicating with the workload identity groups, they are looking at this as not a security endpoint, but as more so a just endpoint. And I think we can provide it to them in that point. It's going to be fine. A JWT or a CWT outline for computational computing with attestation as a part of it.
Mhm.
It's a reasonable ask. I think we can do it.
Okay, so I'm sure it can be done. Let me sort of walk you through how this technology gets consumed so that you understand what I'm really trying to get at here. So JP Morgan, and this is a scenario. There could be myriad other scenarios. I do not seek to preclude them, but so take it in that spirit. JP Morgan decides we want to standardize on Whimsy and specifically SPIFFE. Right, and so we want our workloads to produce workload identity tokens. And we want our workloads to run in trusted execution environments. We're looking to, by reading a bunch of documents like RFCs and whatever, different documentation, to understand how will my verifier, with combination with perhaps other software, give me my workload identity token so that I can uplift my enterprise to that technology. Okay, and what I don't see today is anything that answers that question. And I would hoping to get an answer to that question, among others. And this is why I'm trying to convince Hank that this is an important, decision for us to document in, across Whimsy Rats and this.
Yeah, sounds right. We have to write it down. So the text is important.
Yep.
So look, if you wish, I can come up with a scenario document that basically says, this is a use case that I'm hoping to address. And I'm simply looking to, what do I need to either document or change in the existing reference architectures that this can happen?
Yeah, it might be a little bit long-winded tour. It takes us maybe 2 meetings to do that. But going from use case / usage scenarios to requirements to claims to where they do come from might be a good exercise that really is this landscape thingy that I was looking for. Because that is very straightforward. But it requires some text output, right? You need to have this usage scenario. You need to have the requirements that you are aware, and you maybe have to understand the threats that come with these requirements or are mitigated by. So it's all a little bit more formal. And we've done this with the software update for the Internet of Things. That document is 80% security considerations.
Yeah.
So,
right. But
maybe
I will tell you this. So when I write the document that I just talked about, if my recommendation is your verifier will produce an EAT, and EAT contains this, the answer is no. That is not something we can deploy. Right. And that means a different answer is needed. All right.
That was very abstract, but I assume I will understand later.
Okay, well, we're out of time. We will have to push the discussion of and prioritization of issues to next week. However, if you have an issue outstanding, just take a look at these two URLs. It should not take you very long. And if the issue has been closed, or maybe it needs to be rewarded now that we know additional things, please do that. Let's do some cleanup to the best of our ability. And next week we'll dive into that, and I will produce the document I just spoke about.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Anything else in the remaining 5 minutes?
We met for the first time on site.
Yes. Yes.
That's all I have to say.
Awesome.
Right. That was really nice.
We can confirm that both Hank and Mark exist as real people.
I was there too, and I confirmed that indeed both exist and they did meet. So I can attest to that, and it's been verified.
What's the plan for Canada?
I'm
That's a very
asking my
politically
boss
charged
to
question.
approve travel.
Oh, right.
But, before plans for Canada is, I think we will need to decide pretty soon if we're authoring content for Canada.
Yep.
Montreal. The weather's gonna suck. I do not recommend Montreal in November, but hey,
Yeah, it's not going to be fun.
the exact opposite of Madrid. Too cold.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is that they should have done, Madrid in November and then Montreal in July. That would have been the right thing to do. But hey,
it was a Corona shift thing, so the venue was booked very, very earlier, and there is a limit to how far you can push it, and they had to do July or do the cancellation fee instead of the movement fee. So and also Madrid actually was astonishingly not melting me.
Yeah,
it was okay, actually. Yeah, it was actually okay. Yeah.
All right, guys, I have to drop off.
right.
See you next week.
Okay.
Take care. Be well. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Manu.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.